So Shalom Aleichem, good morning, good afternoon, whoever's tuning in at the moment. Today's class is of the parsha called Toldos, and within Toldos we read about Yitzchak, about one of the second forefather Yitzchak, and how he's in the land of Israel, and he's been blessed by Hashem with much sheep and cattle, and he's in this area where they're grazing, and he's in the area called Gerar, which is around where Abimelech lives. Abimelech is the king of Gerar, and we're going to read some verses, and we'll discuss those verses. But what happens is that they're looking for water and the water resource of Israel, and they're required to dig wells. Um, and and we're going to read some of the verses, but with Abimelech, the king of that area, his servants are claiming that he's using up the wells, the water area, and so he moves on. Yitzchak is required to move on to a place further and find his own wells. So we'll we will learn about these words and understand the verses. What we're going to actually take a deeper investigation in is in that we're going to we're going to try to understand what is the Torah teaching us about the idea of Yitzchak's wells, and how can we utilize that as a profound metaphor for our own spiritual service to Hashem and the divine commandments that we have, and how that helps us within the divine commandment to love Hashem with all our being. So I'm going to share the screen so we can see the verses, and read the verses together. Okay, so um, we should see. You should be seeing the verses as we go along. Okay, so you should be seeing the screen at the moment, and we can see the thing. So it says, so I'm just going. Isaac went away from there because Abimelech's servants have sent him along, and he camped in the Gerar Valley, and he settled there, somewhere far from the city, as Rashi makes the comment. Yitzchak redug the other wells of water that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, which the Philistines had blocked up after Abraham's death, and he gave them the same names that his father had given them. Verse 19. Um, so, um, so Isaac's servants then dug elsewhere in the Gerar Valley and found a well of fresh spring water there. The shepherds of Gerar now quarreled with Isaac's shepherds, saying that since we used the land to pasture our flocks, the water he discovered is ours. So Isaac named the well Esek, which literal translation means contention, because they had contended or fight with. Here, Rashi explained to us that Esek means a dispute from their word. Verse 22, they dug another well. They quarreled over that one too and named it Sitna, which literally means harassment. He moved on from there and dug yet another well. So in this context, just before, I'm going to highlight that the Hebrew word is biyatek. Biyatek means that they moved away. So he moved on from there, dug another well. The servants of Abimelech did not quarrel over it, so he named it Rehovot. Rehovot meaning open spaces. And now Yitzchak says, and they say, for now, God has granted us ample space to expand, and we will flourish materially in the land. Okay, so I'm stopping the sharing of the screen there. They're the verses that we're going to they're the verses that we're discovering, or we're going to discuss. As we've said, so the verses which I showed you are Genesis 26, verses 18 to 22. And the quick summary is that Isaac's servants dig the wells there, which were originally dug by Abraham, and they argue about it, and they find three wells. The first one is called Esek. For the first one we called Asek, and then the next one is called let me just um, so as we said, that there were three, that the three wells that were found. One is called Esek, meaning, as we said, contention or argumentation, sitna, or from the word sino, which means hostility, and the third well, which is Rechevet, which is broad places, and is a place where they found peace and plenty and untouched, and there's a symbolism in those names. So these wells, so our Torah teaches us that the names and the activities which happened in life are for us not random, but they speak to us, and if they're recorded in the Torah, there is a lesson to be learned from them. So therefore, in this case, these wells don't necessarily mean physical water. Obviously, this is what happened. This is the narrative. This is in the physical plane what happened. That there was a search for water. Water is a basic resource for man and animal life for it to grow. There is a deeper meaning, but there's a symbolic representation which we have to extract from this story to understand. And we can understand that in Yitzchak's life and in Yitzchak's spiritual endeavor, these names and these names that the Torah is giving them are deliberate, and there is a lesson to be learned about it. So that this physical water represents stages in our service of God and living and growing. Water helps us live and grow. So the digging here, it represents our service to Hashem in a deliberate, sometimes challenging method, a way that we have to remove impediments so that we can get to the deepest areas of ourselves. So that represent challenging work when we, in a physical sense, remove the earth and get to a particular level to find a water source. So also we have to dig within inside of ourselves to remove the earth and concealments that cover the hidden internal springs that we have in each one. So we're going to look at this. We're going to a little bit do a further deep dive into this idea. What does it mean that we need to do the spiritual work inside of ourselves? What is that about? What idea does that represent? In a physical sense, when we search for a well, when we search for water for a well, and this is what Isaac was doing. That's what the verses were telling us. That one of the representations of spiritual service, and in fact the main spiritual service that we have, as we understand that Isaac did, was is what is represented by the physical effort that he put into finding wells. We and we find that this service of finding wells, the effort that's involved is something that you have to, as we mentioned before, dig in the ground for. This is different to, for instance, what we describe Abraham's Abraham's service that he did. Abraham's service was to give kindness to all and to share his spiritual achievements with all. And he was non-restraining, meaning he shared this good, he shared the goodness that he had received and his understandings of Hashem. He shared he shared them without constraint to all that came through. He encamped, as we've discussed previously, he encamped himself at the crossroads, and any travelers that came through, he shared that with them and gave them food, gave them sustenance. This, in a symbolic terminology of understanding in the realm of mysticism and Chassidus, means that he issued out kindness, but he did a top-down version. He did from above to below. He didn't look at any of the specifics of the person that was coming through. He just gave out unstintingly to all who came through. This is different than what Isaac did, the representation of what Isaac did. Isaac was a digger of uh, of of wells, meaning he insisted on everybody doing their own individual service themselves. He did the Aveda, which is represented in a physical sense of digging inside of the area that a person is and finding that wellspring that's in the person. And when a person digs in a physical sense for when a person has to dig in a physical sense for a well, he has to work on some ground, and he has to remove all the big stones, little stones, and pebbles which are covering the source of the water, where it's covering the spring. And then as you work that area, you reveal the waters which come from the depths of the spring. And in verses of the Torah, we talk about the deep springs, and in the case of when the flood came, that Noah said, we Noah and the water. It talks about the waters which came from the depth of the earth, and in his physical sense, what we understand is that with Yitzchak, or when you dig in the ground and you're looking for water, we know that there is water channels and water existing in the depths of the ground. It's You know that they are there, but they are in the depths, but they're hidden. And and at this point, while they're in the depths of the ground, they're of no that they can't help you. So in order to bring that to the fore, when you reveal the depth of the spring in a physical sense, that is done by working the ground and digging deep, and this represents the service that a person does from below up. He has to work on himself and reveal those depths that he has in his soul, but he has to bring it up from below to above. So, and when you find those depths, and when you're deep depths, it is a very difficult service to try to find in your own self. You have to do equivalently of what's happening in the physical sense when you look for the spring water. You have to take away the very large stones which are blocking the path to the spring. In the spiritual sense, that means that a person has to work on you could say, big ticket items in a person's personality and the parts of himself which oppose, which are you can see in a very obvious sense, which are opposing his movement towards heaven, his connection to Hashem, which, as we've been learning in the Tanya, we say that each person has an animal soul and a spiritual soul. The nefesh Bahamas, the nefesh Elokis. Person has to elevate and refine those aspects of his connection with himself and mankind, which are represented by his animal soul, and that because that animal soul is hiding and covering up on the spiritual nefesh Elokis. And in fact, when we talk about that the spirit that the nefesh Elokis, the neshama, comes down from the heavens to be enclosed and to be part of a physical body, this is a descent for the nefesh Elokis, for the godly soul. It comes down from a very high place from the heavens, and we use the expression it comes down to a lowly pit, meaning the lowly pit of the in a physical sense. It has to go to a place which is opposite its natural place where it exists, which is in the spirit in the heavens, and becomes enclosed and becomes a working partner with the animal soul and the body itself, because and the spiritual soul from inside of itself, even though it has different energies, and which can combine with the physical with the physical body, and that enable it to be a partner the with the animal body as it becomes part of the combined human being, the Jewish person. That Jewish person, as we learned in Tanya, has the has the spiritual soul and the animal soul, which is giving life to the energies of the world, and then becoming one unit. They so after the Jewish soul comes into the physical body and it's joining with the nefesh Bahamas, with the animal soul, it has to work and has to dig inside of itself to pull away that the negativity, the big blockages, and then the big boulders, the smaller boulders, what would we represent, the big obvious glaring points of physicality, rudeness, a person's own ego, and then after he's done that sort of work, which is digging inside of himself, he has to then to get them all and clean up the more subtle areas, right, of the human person of the Jewish person, in order to reveal, and let the light of the spiritual side of himself come into the world. And this needs this equivalent of digging the wells, and so he has to change what the viewpoint of the animal soul and what it naturally wants to do. The natural animal soul wants to, cleave to the realms of physicality, of enjoyment, of brashness, of all the things which are opposite a spiritual side, and to allow that spiritual side, to come through. as we've learned in the Tanya, for instance, a person has to move himself and train himself to be involved with learning of Torah. And if a person, as the Tanya expresses, that there is a significant difference between a person who reviews his lessons 100 times to the person who reviews his lesson 101 times. As we probably touched on when we were learning the Tanya, it was standard in the days of in days past that a person trained himself and trained him and herself to review his lessons 100 times. So the person who puts in that special effort to do it 101, that's in a way training himself bring out the better part of himself so that he works to a higher level cause. Same thing with giving charity. A person might give some sort of a person might give what he's thinking about doing it, but as I said, as a person in the rules of halacha of Jewish laws, a third person is allowed. The person who's responsible for collecting the tzedakahs, he is allowed to force another person in some sort of way, urge another person to give extra tzedakah, to give extra charity. That is in order to train to train the person, and we have to do it in a way of simcha and joy. And this is the idea of digging deep inside of yourself, which is a service, which is going from below above. This represents the service of Yitzchak, and the service of Yitzchak when he was digging the wells. He was trying to reveal the special energies of his neshama, so that it would allow the revelations of the spiritual side to come through, and this has to be done through a love for Hashem, for a desire. I mean, a desire to come close to Hashem. What do we call love? We have discussed previously. Love is the idea of drawing two persons together, two people together, or when you love an object, you want to draw that object close to yourself. So a person has to work on himself and change his nature so that he can be drawn closer to spiritual things. And this is the idea of having love from Hashem, love to Hashem, the idea of working and working himself from bottom up to come close to Hashem, to the point where he has a love which is like a burning flame. That love of burning flame automatically draws people together. As you see, people get drawn to a flame, and this is how we explain the love that Isaac had and was part of his service to Hashem by the idea of by the analogy, by the symbolism of of digging digging the wells. And this flow comes down, and the flow of love that a person can build from below up, Hashem gives him commensurate love to help him feed his love for Hashem. So if we go back and think about the verses that we said, and we said that the verses and the worlds that they found are named specifically in order to teach us some ideas. So the three wells that Isaac found are to teach us that the three wells, which were called Eshek, Sitna, Rehovot, this expresses three types and three classes of the love that Isaac had. Now, where can we learn about that love? We have in our daily prayers, in the Shema prayer, which the Shema prayer is expresses the love that we have, and the commandment is of the love that we should have a love which is, we will quote, we use the expression, b'chol lavavcha, with all my heart, b'chol nafshcha, with all my soul, b'chol madecha, and with all my with all my effort. So this is what we say in our in our prayers. Now that specific expression, that the specific expression where we said b'chol lavavcha, with all my heart, b'chol my soul, with all my might, that's written in the Torah, in Deuteronomy, in Parshas V'eschanan, chapter 6, verse 5. That's that expression is excerpted, or that whole expression, that whole section is excerpted in our daily prayers, which we say in the Shema prayer, which is, as you know, as we all know, a fundamental prayer. We can understand that Yitzchak's service, when he dug the three wells, parallels the ideas which are embedded in the three names, which they were called. The Talmud talks about that one verse in the Torah speaks about that it'll come the time at some point when other people will come and they will be working together with you, and they will be your shepherds. Another verse says that you have to go out to the field and collect your produce. The Gemara then asks the question, well, how do those two operate together? One verse says people are going to do the work for you, and the other verse says that you have to do the work yourself. So the Gemara answers with that and says, at the time when you're doing the will of Hashem, Ritzena Shel Malkam, that's the expression. When you're doing the will of Hashem, then all your service, your physical work, will be done by others. When you are not doing the service to Hashem, then you have to do you have to do the work yourself. And so the commentators say that these two expressions, or these two ideas, that the work will be done by others or you'll do the work yourself, they reflect the two portions of the Shema. The first portion of the Shema, the first section of the Shema, talks about that if you're in one particular state of mind, then the work has to be done by you. If you're in another state of mind, then others will do the work for you. Meaning, what's those different states? Paragraph 1 of the Shema, that is the first the first 6 or 7 lines of it, as we have the Shema broken out. The first paragraph of the Shema talks about when you will collect your grain. That is to say, he says, if you will listen to Hashem's words and follow His commandments, Hashem said, "I will bring you the rain in your time. You will collect your produce. Everything will be. You will work hard, and then you'll harvest." That is to say, that reflects those 3 passages that reflects the 3 expressions that we mentioned before, the idea of b'chol lavavcha, with all your heart, b'chol nafshcha, with all your soul, b'chol madecha, with all your might. Meaning, b'chol lavavcha, b'chol nafshcha means with with your personal effort, with all your heart, you're involved, with all your work. Second passage of the Shema, the second paragraph, the second main paragraph of the Shema, that talks about when you will work the land or work the field. You've done a lot of your personal work, but that verse only puts the first two expressions, in the quote. In other words, you have to do, but it doesn't mention the idea of b'chol ma'adecho, with all your might. And it doesn't say that b'chol ma'adecho. That is to say that if you don't have the love to Hashem, if you have only the first two expressions of love to Hashem, or with all your heart, with all your soul, but you didn't do v'chol ma'adecho, you didn't do the v'chol ma'adecho, then you are, as if you're digging the well inside of yourself and pulling out. So whatever you put in is what you're getting out. Even if you go with all of your heart, with whole nafshcha, with all your soul, you get the reward commensurate with the love that you put in. Your connection, the blessing that you get is of the level of how much effort you put in. That's the reward that you get. The first part of the Shema, the first paragraph of the Shema, emphasizes the idea of b'chol ma'adecho, your entire effort, your entire energies, even beyond your natural means. You've revealed yourself even much beyond the ultimate of what you can. And this is the meaning of Ratzon, of doing the will of Hashem. The will of Hashem is something which is transcendent. It is details. It is bringing the glory of Hashem into the world. Doing working on yourself and revealing the Mayon is the realm of how Hashem expresses in the world. Whatever you put in, that's what you get out, and ultimately what we need to achieve, we want to achieve the unity of the two levels, which is, as explained in Chassidus, the Mamala commandment and the Seva commandment. We want to unite the levels of our work, which is what we call the revelation of above to the revelations of below. We have to unite and do as recorded in the level of the Shema, of going b'chol ma'adecho with all your absolute effort, so that you get into a level where you are so high and so connected with Hashem that it's not just a matter of cleaning up and making the divine love that the soul has become able to be revealed in this world, but it brings about the highest connection to Hashem. Then this is the revelations that we fulfill, because as our sages teach, that the greatness of serving God with the level of the Chol Ma'adecha, as we said, which is in Deuteronomy 6:5, that's the power to unify the transcendent, what we call the Makifim levels of revelation of God beyond the world, with the immanent and with the aspects of the divine will which is in the world. That is, we join together the transcendent capabilities with the immanent capabilities, the Hebrew words being the mamala and the makif, the way Hashem fills all the world and the way Hashem transcends all the world. And we can join that unity, and that's the unity of the first part of the Shema. then this unity is not just merely fulfilling commandments intellectually because we understand them, which is the meaning of with all your heart and with all your soul, but through internalized love that transcends any intellect. That's an overflow of the heart that moves a person beyond logic. And if you can move to that level, if you can get into that zone where that love of Hashem, that connection to Hashem, that overflow of the heart that moves beyond logic, that brings blessings which are beyond the realm of physicality. Now, if we go back to the idea of the three wells and their names, we can understand that these three levels that we've mentioned, or the three wells that we mentioned, correspond beautifully to the three loves commanded in Deuteronomy in 6:5. When we talk about loving God with all your heart and all soul, they refer to working ourselves, and that's the idea of esek and sitna, the struggle, the reflecting the inner struggle and reflecting the inner passion to try to bring that. And when you can join and when you get to that level, then you can love God with all your might. You get to the level of Rehovot, being width, and you get to the level which is the expansion of the self, to the level where God fills every capability. Now, how do you do that? How do you get to that level? So as we were learning the phrase, as we were learning the expression that was in the Torah, the first thing that we saw is that before the people came to report that they had found that third well, it said Viatek Misham, and I pointed that out when we were looking at the verses. The phrase said Viatek Misham, which means he moved from there. That is to say, before you can get to this ultimate highest level, before the discovery of the third well, means that you need a big movement. You need to move yourself. You need to get a level of spiritual and advancement, a movement beyond the regular, beyond your regular level. That is, you have to, and that's the word, that's the meaning of the word viatek. Viatek means that they in the physical sense, they move from one place to the other place, a big movement. So that's also a person has to find within himself to move to a totally different area, go to a zone which is beyond any having to fight yourself. They're beyond the level of esek and sitna, go beyond the level of working or the level of struggle that's inside of yourself. But a person can move to a much higher level, and that's like that highest level of love to Hashem, which is the level of B'chol Ma'adecho. So this shows us that that this story, that the narrative of Yitzchak's well and the finding of the three wells represents a person's individual struggle, a spiritual journey that a person has to take. A person has to move from Esek and Sitna, from the spiritual journey of struggle and persistence by taking the big blockages and then the smaller blockages and even the little pebbles, but when you take them away, and that reveals the expansive love and the divine revelation that's symbolized by the word Rehovot, which means width and greatness. And in order to do that, he said a person has to make that big jump. So Yitzchak's unyielding work for himself teaches us an ultimate lesson for ourselves, that through persistence and love, even when faced with opposition, the idea of sitna, and with persistence, but you can lead to an expansive connection to Hashem, which is symbolized by the well, which was called Rehovot, and that can reveal that flowing spring of divine love that we have, that divine desire to connect with Hashem, which is hidden inside of us. So if we contemplate this image of Yitzchak's well, we can inspire ourselves to do our own spiritual digging, and that will remove the barriers that hide God's love in us. And we do that by challenging ourselves and going beyond our norm. And like we mentioned before, that that challenge is represented by doing things in a way of 101. If we normally do things with a like in a unit of 100, we have to go beyond ourselves and do this way, which is of 101. So that third well, Rehovot, symbolizes that capacity to love in that third mention of effort in the Shema. And this is, as we said, not necessarily a physical strength, but it's an expansion of the self to allow our own way through that netok, through challenging ourselves and moving ourselves into a new paradigm, a new existence. Okay, so with that as a major challenge and teaching from this week's portion, we'll wish everyone that we have a great week, and success in our spiritual endeavors till we meet again in our next class.